Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to session 7 of the CASI-F in Action seminar and workshop this afternoon. My name is Corinne Edwards, and I'm from Coventry University Enterprises. And what I'll be talking to you about in this session this afternoon is an application of the framework to the case of sustainable innovation. I will be going through the slides, but just wanted to let you have a little bit of housekeeping. And that is that the session will last for approximately 1 hour. By the end of the session, you should be able to understand what CASI-F is, and you should be able to prepare your sustainable innovation case and use the CASI-F matrix. We're going to conclude the session this afternoon, but please feel free to post questions throughout the session, and you can do that through the chat facility. But at the end of the session, the host will collate the questions and then I will answer all of those together. But please feel free all the way through the session, if you wish to post any questions to the host through the chat facility, that you can do that. Okay, I'd like to run through the agenda for today and really what the session is going to cover and the order we're going to cover it with. So what we're going to do is be giving you a brief introduction to CASI, and then we're going to be covering the case and how you would select the case and how you would prepare the CASI-F framework. What we will be doing later on is looking at demonstrating the effect of the perspectives and from a management perspective and decision-making levels. And we'll be using a case study, and this is a case study that's familiar to ourselves. We're using the location independent working case. And again, finally, at the end of the session, there'll be the opportunities for you to ask questions through the host, and you can post these at any time online to the host using the chat facility. Right, okay, so really the session in brief is going to be presenting the consideration for the impacts of perspective and in consideration of the decision making, and in particular the sustainable innovation case. As I say, we've already said that in our case that's location independent working. You may well have actually already been joining us after a second session, and you would have, I suspect, attended session 6, which was a common framework for the assessment and management for sustainable innovation. And that session looked in a more detailed look and took a more detailed view of the CASI-F. If you've missed that around, you will be able to see that online. It will be posted on the CASI website soon, as will all the presentations that we've done this afternoon and today will be available to you all. Okay, you should have in front of you then really what we wanted to do is explain to you as well what CASI-F, what it actually meant and what it stood for. Now the official title is quite a wordy set of words, and the official title, the project's official title I should say, is Public Participation in Developing a Common Framework for Assessment and Management of Sustainable Innovation. But as that's quite a long string of words, we refer to that as CASI. The project itself is committed to the Horizon 2020 Challenge, climate action, environment, resource efficiency and raw materials. And it's a funded Framework 7 programme. The CASI project mobilises 19 partners from 11 member states, and we've got a network of 60 country correspondents, thus we're covering the whole of Europe. Now moving on to slide number 6, I'd like to just give you a brief introduction to the CASI-F. The objective of the framework is for you to be able to use the framework to assess the advantages and disadvantages of using the sustainable innovation. What it particularly looks at is a range of areas, and in particular considerations that you need to consider. So it might be placing it in the context of social, environmental, economic dimensions. But generally what the project will try and do is involve the citizen in the policy concerns. And that's quite important throughout the framework. So really, in short, that what the framework is designed to do is to help assessment and management of sustainable innovations. And continuing on the background, there are two main areas of process that we will aim to target, and they are the assessment features and the management features. And we're going to be looking at both of those in the next couple of slides. We'll cover the management features next. And whilst we don't do a practical mapping exercise, we will make you aware later on in the presentation of some of the more in-depth elements to this. Okay. So the management features, and as I say, these slides are available, and if at any point then you wish to refer back to them, they will be available on the website. Will be the use of the CASI-F process. Really, again, is to encourage sustainability becoming integrated into management features. So what with the CASI-F process will help you to do is through an integration of sustainability through the entire process of the value chain, innovation, I should say, value chain. This will help you integrate sustainability into that. It will also allow you to position sustainability or consider positioning sustainability within an organisation's strategic plan and identify and attain objectives beyond the business and profit ones. Now, when we go into our case study later on, we'll be talking about particularly location independence working. Some of the things that hadn't originally been evident came out of using such a framework, and that particularly focused on the work-life balance, but that was particular to that area. We also got to, or able to as well, demonstrate a positive environmental impact from the innovation. That might be carbon saving in our case, that they've possibly diffused over time. And also how things could link into, how your innovation can link into being part of a corporate social responsibility programme and strategy for an organisation. But what it will do as well is cut across addressing sustainability related challenges through normal business operations. Okay, so the next slide, it's not moved on, I think you should have here. Next slide headed up, selecting a case and preparation for completion of the CASI-F matrix. So what you would do at this point is to identify a sustainable innovation that you would wish to map. You'd also then need to map the innovation within the CASIpedia, and the CASIpedia is actually available on the website, through the CASI website, and it's under casi2020.eu. We'll be sending you details of this and how you can get onto that. But the CASI, we'll mention the CASIpedia at certain times, but that is available on the CASI website. So what you will need to do if you are the user of the process is to sufficiently know and have the knowledge and understanding to be able to complete the relevant fields. You'd have an understanding of the subject area that you were particularly working in or subjecting to the CASI-F matrix. Ideally, it would be in an ideal world, it would be that if you were to carry out the mapping with the input and support of the innovator. So if there are people who can be involved in supporting that, that quite often is helpful. And CASIpedia itself is divided into 3 sections, and they are practices, outcomes, and players. And we'll actually be discussing in more detail those three sections later on in the presentation. So we'll go first of all to practices. Now, in this section, you would look at when mapping your innovation. Would consider when mapping your innovation. What this actually does, this section, is it looks in a lot of basic detail about the case. Now, this may be considering geographical scope. In some cases, it may just be a local innovation, but it may be an innovation that's going to go across Europe or is going to be covering international, national, worldwide. It would depend what the geographical scope was going to be. You also look as well as the dates of origination from the date you're actually going to implement and diffuse the actual innovation. And those would be taken into account at this point. What the innovations would need to do, and we would hope that would do, is to link to the 4 Horizon 2020 priorities. And these particularly are central to the CASI project. And just as a reminder, they focus on climate action, environment, resource efficiency, raw materials, those 4. And the types of sustainable innovation that the matrix would look at would be product, service, organisational, marketing, social, system, and governance. We'll also be considering here as well factors for success. And the factors for success could be technological, it could be economical or environmental. Maybe that, for example, we will talk about our location independent working. There's been a reduction in carbon saving by virtue of people changing the method upon which they work. So that would be a factor for success. Also social and political factors for success, and how the agendas for each host nation would fit in to that. We've also got to remember as well key drivers and trends, and also the tensions and dilemmas that may need to be considered. There may be a national drive as well to move forward on a particular item, and it may be that we need to consider how our findings or the innovation that we have and the findings that we have, how that would impact onto that. Right, okay, so we should be on slide number of practices, which is slide number 1, with slide number 10 here for me. So the practices in particular will encompass the basic details about the case. And what we're talking about here is its name and its description. Sorry, I think you should have the right slide now. The financial measurements need also to be taken into account. And we're talking about market potential here. So that might be the size of the market, the share value of the market, the price, the quantity, how much of the market share that would have. And that would depend on the innovation as to what the value of that would be. It might be a social innovation of low financial benefit, but it might be something nonetheless very worthwhile. We also as well would want to consider as well how the innovation is spread. So one of the things that we will call on in the matrix is that the extent to which the civil society, and that's the EU, maybe non-member states, government, business, research actors, are either involved with the designing and developing of the innovation, and how they would use and benefit from the innovation. So it's how transferable as well we need to consider is the innovation. Does it apply to more than one sector? Does it apply to just one sector? Is it very specific? Is it a specific client group that it will apply to? And how it can be spread geographically. There may be situations where something would be a new innovation to one part of Europe, yet it's custom and practice in another. And it's how that innovation could be spread across boundaries and areas, so to have a wider spread. But it may be, and I think we do accept, that it may be just related to a specific area or a specific group. There are also where something may be new as an innovation, but there also as well, it may be an adaptation of something that exists, which makes it into a new innovation, and it's adapted in such a way. You'll also later on as well be asked about sustainability assessments and how they've been linked into the innovation. And where specific measurements are used to assess this, or methods, I should say, how does that impact on the innovation? What is the impact of that to the end product or the end result? So moving on then to outcomes, and this further explores in more detail innovation. And it actually starts to look in more detail about how we would review the degree of innovation, and is it in its current state of innovation? At what point is it being met? So at that point, what point is it actually at? And then it could be something that can be used and developed and reviewed and referred back to. But also as well, explore ratings and strengths and weaknesses. And we've actually put a rating against this. And those things would include as well novelty, the complexity, the IPR protection that exists or needs to exist. Do we need to consider that? Is the innovation so innovative we need to protect it with IP, or is it something we want to open share with everybody? What are the timings and what are the timescales for the innovation? About the robust as well with design, and how robust is the design? Does it need to be changed, or does it need to be refined in any way, or is it acceptable as it is? And then also sectoral applicability as well, we do need to consider as to which sectors it would actually apply to, but also the threats and the risks that we would need to consider as well. There may be certain policies as well that would dictate our innovation. There may be government policies, and there may be things that we are tied into. But as well, where we would be determining of how transforming the innovation actually is, and what impact that would actually have on economic systems, infrastructure, government systems, and how that would impact social, industrial development, and environmental and resources. So the next slide, should say players. And this is the third section of the three that we're referring to. And the third section actually refers to the players or stakeholders actually involved with the innovation. Now, the innovator would be the originator of the sustainable innovation. That's what we mean by innovator. The funders and sponsors are those who play a key role at early stages of the innovation process. And this might be by providing the financial means during the design, the prototyping, the testing, and the development phases. And it doesn't necessarily need, the funder might be somebody as well who's allowing that to happen or allowing resource to be released to that. Supporters and brokers they're the intermediaries who would actually facilitate positioning and dissemination and the diffusion of the innovation. And they're obviously a key part of the process for the matrix. And the beneficiaries, and they're the direct and private sector, the private sector, societal stakeholders, indirect policymakers, for example. But they were the people who would be actually the beneficiaries of the actual development. Now, the next slide is quite a busy slide, and I'm not sure how much of the slide you can actually see, but I'll just give you an overview of this, the whole matrix. So this is the matrix all combined. We will be going through the sections of the matrix. So if you take then from left to right along the top line, you will see headings, and that is government, and that's national, regional, local government organisations. You've got the next slide would be, next I should say column would be business, and that's our small to medium sized, large enterprises. That's actually business. So it could be businesses of many sizes. Civil society, and by this we mean the community, social enterprise, the citizens, the consumers. And finally, research, which is a heading on the fourth column from the left, which is research funding organisations. There might be publicly funded organisations, private research and innovation support organisations, higher education or institutions, for example. We go back then to the first column, and you'll see 3 management levels, and that's level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1, where our strategic actions, these are ideas, sustainable demand, sustainable challenges, for example, and this is a strategy level that would give the overarching strategy to the matrix. The tactical, which is level 2, is that we've called here tactical programming actions. This is the intervention concepts, the methods, the structures, and this is where we'll probably be showing a lot of the action plan of how things are going to develop. And then level 3 would be the frontline and the operational actions and the implementation. Actually, the processes, maybe there's barriers, cycles that we need to follow in with, and roles of stakeholders, and that will be actually in that section there. So I mentioned earlier on a rating, and really I think it's just to let you know that the rating that's actually in there is that the counting on the rating is not important would be 1, with high importance being high. And this action actually determines a whole a value by when it's rated, how it's multiplied, and then to give an action plan to move forward. So, for example, at the end of the process, when the innovator has included all their actions into the matrix, what they will then do is evaluate the actions and rate them. So this would give the innovator an action plan which is more realistic and feasible for themselves to work with and implement. So, for example, if they're a company, they are more likely that they will pick up on actions from the business category, unless they're able maybe to lobby with one or more of the other categories to do something. If they are a university, then it may be that they would be focusing on the research and education area. And as I say, just to reiterate that the banding goes from importance of high to low, high being 5 and low being 1. And when we move through to the next, to the later slides, you will see that how that rating and matrix works. So we're now at the point where we're actually going to give a demonstration of the area, and that will give you a consideration of the stakeholder perspectives and management levels that we have when we're considering what actions would be required to drive forward an innovation. Now, in our case, the example that we've chosen to share with you today is known as location independent working, and we abbreviate that to, say, LIW, location independent working. But what I'll do is, before we go into that mapping, is give you a little bit of background to that, to give you an idea of the product that we're referring to. What broadly location independent, or LIW, enables us as an organisation to do is for staff to locate anywhere. So basically, using technology, a member of staff or a member of the team can work from anywhere. So whether that's off-site, in their own home, while they're travelling overseas, basically the technology allows them to be able to work from anywhere. So it's location independent working, and there's no fixed rules. What it is not about is home working solely. Home working and the ability to be able to work from home is just one element of that. So what it would enable, in our case, for staff to be able to do is, if they've got an internet connection, they can connect to our network, to our files, through our thin client. That's the technology that we would use. It's important to say as well that this technology is secure, and it's one of the things that we take very seriously, the security of our data, and it's one of the things that actually underpins how LIW works well, because we know that our client data is secure, but we can allow people to work basically from anywhere. An example of today is, in fact, what I'm doing is I'm remotely working with you, and what that has negated is the cost of travel to get from A to B, the cost of a lot of other people travelling to get from A to B, but that people can participate across a wide range of locations, but they can also save on the cost of travel, but the carbon footprint is considerably reduced, which also helps people with what they are able then to do and how they are able to manage their time, rather than, should we say, sitting in an airport waiting to travel. They're able to access a whole host and range of information without having to move. One of the other things that location independent working has done for our organisation, and we get many reports of this, is how the improvement on work-life balance. This is how people are able to manage their time around their work responsibilities, and this has had a huge impact for a lot of people as to how they can manage their work-life balance, and it's quite a consideration, say, for people planning to implement that they would consider that. It's also encouraging as well the management of individuals and how they manage their time and their resources, and that needs to be encouraged. But we can talk about that in a little bit more detail as we go through. Now, I am not sure if you are able to see in great detail the slide in front of you, and hopefully you can read that. It is quite a small slide, but as I say, these are available after the today's webinar, and they will be available to you as well. But what we've actually done is taken the sections from the matrix, and we're now going to look at those in more depth. So the first section we're going to look at is the implementation, sorry, I beg your pardon, it's government. And what we're going to look at is that we'll call it a column, that column, and how it breaks across the three levels. Could I ask at this point as well that if you could ignore the action restricted comment? We will look at that later. And as I say, but if you can at this point ignore that action restricted comment. So what we're going to be doing here is, when we look at this section, is looking at the government stakeholders. And it's really about how we can move the innovation forward at different managing levels. And the actions are quite often subjective, and they may come from the stakeholders who are present at discussions. It may be that it's the idea of or the perception of how people feel or see how the innovation is going to work. Now, in this level, and I'll go through the three levels in a bit of detail. So our first level, we have got implementing legislation to help support companies and organisations to set it up. And we're referring to set up location independent working. Now, there has been a huge shift, not only in the UK, worldwide, of location independent working and how that can benefit a lot of organisations. And it may be that if there is a different cultural set, and I'm sure that how things have moved in 20 years with the information that the internet has brought, and the ability, and what the internet has given us the ability to be able to do, and the things that we didn't think were possible, such as maybe webinars and Skype, as much as we are able to, and how we would come to use that as an everyday business tool. And it may be that there's legislation about that people don't necessarily need to be 9 to 5, flexible working, a whole cultural mind shift may be assisted. One of the things about legislation would be the minimum levels maybe of broadband, and how that then would impact wider regions and wider areas. Then level 2, we've got about setting up funds to help companies and organisations in the implementation and the necessary technology, and maybe buying the necessary technology, and that may be training staff. And what we are aware of is that companies may want to access a nationwide scheme. That nationwide scheme to encourage companies to work remotely, reduce premises costs, to reduce the travel time, to increase the health and well-being, reduce carbon. And carbon, as we know from the Paris summit last week, carbon reduction is a very key and high agenda on all government targets and focuses. But there may be things that regional government or national government might wish to implement. There may be a case that by reducing carbon, there may be tax breaks, and whether that's likely or not. But there are things that we can take into consideration, and certainly the matrix will help us consider those. Local government assistance as well, as I say, may be, we've already touched on it, may be appreciated, and we've got that in level 3, where we've got the high-speed connection of internet connectivity, and that's something that might be local, but it is of an impact to those people possibly living in rural areas that don't have a very high broadband connectivity. Right, and we'll move on then to the referred to as the second column, which is business. And again, within this this column, we'll be here with this column, we'll be looking at business stakeholders. And in this case, this is the innovator, who is the person who has, in our case, implemented the location independent working scheme, and a manager who's actually within an organisation who's actually rolled this out, championed it, and delivered it. There's more control at each management level needed to drive the innovation forward. And this is quite often reflected in the scores. So a lot of this column, the scores are quite high because they've got quite a high impact. So level 1 for ourselves would be committing to the long-term funding to purchase, replace and manage infrastructure and equipment necessary for remote working. And that we feel will be a high priority. As we all know, technology moves incredibly quickly and things change. And it's how we would commit to that so that we equip our members, our team members and our staff with equipment that is fit for purpose and allows them to do a job effectively, but also that's secure and is complies with data protection type of issues, but more to the point is secure as well in cases of client confidentiality and the data that we hold. Secondly, on this the business column, we've got using the office premises for others to increase income generation through downsizing, and maybe using this location to reduce the CO2 footprint by travelling less and contributing to less congestion. This could be through maybe income generation. Can we share our premises with other organisations if that's necessary? We've also got as well in this column the training of the staff, and this is quite an important or a very important aspect to implementing our innovation. And this is again reiterating and reaffirming the data protection issues, the health and safety issues. For example, if people are working remotely, have their health and safety issues been adequately addressed? Are they sitting at inappropriate furniture? Are they taking necessary breaks? Are their rooms well lit? The health and safety that goes on, particularly removing people from the normal workplace, that they actually go into a different environment. There is not somebody there who is making sure that the health and safety issues are necessarily adhered to. And it's about the individual taking ownership of their own health and safety and responsibilities, and really ensuring there's a safer working environment and to eliminate those sort of risks. So to summarise on that, we've got strategically committing to purchases and replacements, and tactically maybe using the premises, maybe for income generation, and thirdly, the training the staff in the necessary data protection, health and safety, security, and all aspects involved in promoting a safer working environment, but also not only a safer working environment, but also an environment that complies with legal regulations, but also complies with the requirements of data protection issues also. One of the fundamental things that we do quite often look at when we're looking at our location independent working is how that can have an impact on sustainability, such as sustainability, business continuity. They're also things that one would need to take into account and consider when using the matrix, and what the impact and benefit to the business would be. Okay, so thirdly, we're now going to look at the civil society, and whether, I think you should be maybe able to see this, but we're looking at the civil society stakeholders at this point. And in this case, in our case, this is the members of staff, members of the team that actually use location independent working, and what they can do themselves to move this innovation forward at the different management levels. Now, firstly, we've got at a strategic level, and we have touched slightly on this, is about embracing a more independent way of working that uses more technology. Now, this in itself may be a different attitude or an attitude shifts required, that members of staff need to be managed in a different way, or members of a team need to be managed in a different way. This is moving away from presenteeism, where people are seen, to actually achievement of tasks, achievement of activities. And it may be that team leaders or team managers may need to have a different mindset or training in order to be able to understand and to embrace that way of working and how that would work, and what benefits they could have from this different methodology of working. And this may be if their staff are having less time away from the office, a more motivated member of staff, that would increase productivity. But it may just be a case of needing to embrace a different way of working and an understanding how management styles have changed over the years, and this is another way of working that may be appropriate. Also, tactically, would need to develop new skills. Now, we've already mentioned about new methods, new skills and tools for managing teams and working with teams. The same actually applies to people working as a member of the team, and how they would need to or would want to measure their ability to achieve a role or to achieve a task, what their contribution would be, and how they would then interact also with their other members of the team or their line manager, and how that would work. And finally, on the frontline and operational, and again, we've talked about this, and this is about setting up a suitable place and a suitable environment to work in. It may be, it's not a good idea for people to sit on the floor for 12 hours, but it would be about people understanding how they can set and create a safe working environment for themselves that would be appropriate. Okay. And then we now look on to, and this is the fourth column, is research and education. And by research, we mean the research and how that can take the innovation forward at the different management levels. So we would have, be able to research the impact on the company's bottom line, and that might be what effect if I reduce my team's resources, and how that would provide research, maybe research into the cost or the value of saving by implementing location independent working, whether people would need to possibly reduce their carbon and the cost effective benefit of that. That also would be for the individual, but also for the organisation. If there's not all the members of the team actually using the building, is there a better way of using that space? So tactically also will be about developing again and training processes to support people. And again, we put that under the research and education, but also using new models, which we have discussed. And in our particular model here, there were no actions that we identified. So, moving on. we can see where all the matrices have come together. And because the impact score on the column business is higher, this is in red. And it's really for the purpose of this exercise is to give you an example of what actions could be taken forward. So the matrix refers to each stakeholders, but the CASI-F matrix will allow the innovator to take forward what they can do on a particular innovation, or what actions that they would take forward and they can implement. The score also will help the innovator to identify whether the actions are realistic and feasible for themselves to implement. For example, if they're a company, they'll be more likely to pick actions from the business category, unless they're able possibly to lobby one of the other categories. But as I say, some of the actions are in red because we've identified these actions and that we can then use those as part of an action plan to take forward. So we've identified, and these are just the action plan, and we've put this into an action plan. We've put them into SMART targets, specific, measurable, assignable, realistic and time-related targets, so that this can then be used as an action plan and monitored, and it may be collectively monitored and a collective action plan. We've also, you'll notice as well, that we've passed this through the section, the phase action restricted. And this actually is referring to the innovator being able to make those actions either public or private. In some cases, it would depend on the innovation. It would depend whether or not that could be in the public domain or whether it was restricted or confidential to the organisation and it was a commercial gain to another partner. And that would be down to the innovator to decide that that's what they would wish to do. The actions, though, then they would possibly upload onto a website, as I say, but some things that we may not do because they're commercially sensitive. But it may be as also that the innovator may wish to hide some of those innovations until a later date when they review and revisit the actions. The project itself, though, is actually on the CASI website. The CASI matrix has been, or is already, there's 48 cases actually already mapped within Casipedia. The matrix is actually at its draft stage at the moment, and depending on the findings, that those will be amended. But there's actually 48 cases, and I would encourage you to look at the CASI website and Casipedia and to investigate and to look in more depth at some of the things that we've only had a short period of time to touch the surface on. What I will now do is move to the last slide and take some questions. If you do have any questions, we've just got 10 minutes for those questions. And so I will read out the questions and then reply back to them. So I've got 3 questions here. The first question I've received is, could the CASI-F be the starting point for an action plan for the innovator, both public and private innovators? And the answer is yes. We've touched on this, that with the opportunity to have restricted and open, both public and private organisations would be able to use the matrix, and obviously I'm sure that the team directly involved in the delivery of the matrix would welcome an opportunity to discuss that in the future in more detail. The second question I have here is how difficult is it for the innovator to do the assessment, create the actions and validate them? Which has been the feedback you received from the LIW innovators about the overall process? Is the framework useful for them? Well, I'll take this in 3 parts. So for the innovator to do the assessments, create the actions and validate them, it's not impossible, but they may wish to work alongside their stakeholders. It may be their decision makers, stakeholders, and partners who are also involved in the process. In our case, on an action-centered learning model, where we're constantly reviewing and re-evaluating what we're doing, although it's possible for the innovator to do the assessment standalone, it would also be advisable that they did actually work with the people who had the end users in order to gather a wide range of research information to understand the full true impact of that. In addition, we've just lost me. Right. In addition to that question, we've also said about actions and validate. And with any research, it's always important. The more validation, the more research that you actually undertake, and the more areas that you can obtain your data from. Obviously, the wider, more breadth that will be able to input into the matrix. We've got the second part of this question is, what has been the feedback we received from the LIW innovators about the overall process? Is the framework useful for them? In answer to this, yes, we have received a lot of feedback from the innovators, and yes, they have found the framework useful for them, in as much as it's been able to enable them to be able to look at the different areas in a logical way that they may not have considered previously. It's also allowed them to review actions or activities that actually exist and perhaps refine that. And it's been useful in that respect to use the matrix. What you will find, and it's with the area that we have chosen, the LIW, is that it is constantly changing area of work, and where it's at one point we were talking about when it was actually implemented, that capabilities for internet activity and ease of access to be able to connect wherever have moved significantly. So it is always evolving. And what we do find as well now with location independent working, not only do we talk about people working remotely, but we also talk about the benefits that it does have for inclusiveness, for people who are maybe in society, how they can be included in the workspace, how maybe if they couldn't work in this remote way, how they would not be able to access and engage in the world of work, but also with aging society, how things we can also include in that. So yes, in answer to the question, the process, the matrix is useful, and yes, we have received good feedback from that, because as I say, our location independent model is an always revolving and changing activity. And then thirdly, the final question is, does the framework help the innovators, i.e. LIW, in assessing and reporting of results achieved by the sustainable innovation in terms of economic, social and environmental performances? Yes, the answer is yes. The framework does help the innovators do that. We do gather quite a lot of data on the economic cost of carbon reduction and the benefit to staff. Staff will, team members will tell us how much value location independent working is to them, and environmentally, there's a considerable shift that people spending a lot of time travelling from A to B, being able to manage their time and be able to manage their workload around appointments, activities, etc. So I think that's the final question. I think I'll just check with the host if there are any further questions. Nope. Okay, then. Well, I'd like to thank you all for listening. As I say, the webinar will be available online, and I would urge you to look at the CASI website, to look at the case studies, to Casipedia, and if you haven't missed any of the earlier webinars, they also will be uploaded. So just to say thank you and wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you.